evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. So, who else has whiplash from the last few weeks, right? This was actually supposed to be a cozy gathering in my living room, and you can see now we have 200 plus people and 9 candidates on stage. So I want to thank everyone who made this happen, because it could not have happened without all the help I got. First, of course, my folks, Shashi and Margaret. I call them the OG activists, and my dad always says, "What's OG?" And then Catherine White, who is mostly my willing partner in crime. Sometimes she just has to be dragged along. And Laura Stokes, who is not here because she's running early voting right now. Thank you to her. Sue, Chris at the check-in table, Ron and Renette, thank you for managing 200 plus people. That was amazing. And thank you, Gilly, for being our timekeeper. So I also want to thank the Reston Community Center staff, Chris, Mark, Bill, and Bibi, if she's here. She's the new director. There she is, back there. Thank you guys so much. Could not have done this without your expertise, because I do not know what I'm doing. And of course, thank you, Congressman Subramaniam. I know I see you out there every day fighting for democracy, and I'm really grateful that you took the time to come here. Thank you so much. So, as we say when we're out in the streets protesting, give yourselves a huge round of applause, because this is what democracy looks like. So now down to the nuts and bolts. We're going to have a 2-minute opening statement by each candidate. Gilly is the timekeeper. Don't look so scared, Gilly. Then we're going to have moderated questions led by Congressman Subramaniam. And then we're going to do an audience Q&A. And I know emotions are running high. The whole tone of this is that it is an informational forum. We are Democrats. We're not hooligans. We're going to channel the Obamas and the Bidens. And we're not going to talk about, we're not going to be negative. We're going to be positive. We're going to uplift each other. During the audience Q&A, you can ask any candidate a question. Again, make it about them. Don't make it about anyone else. And candidates will have 2 minutes to answer each question again. And then they'll do a 2-minute closing. And with that, I'll turn it over to Congressman Subramaniam.
Thank you all so much for being here. Welcome to the 11th District Congressional Forum. Let's give Radhika a big round of applause. She made this look easy, but this was not easy to put together, so thank you, Radhika, for all that you did. The other person I want to recognize is Congressman Jerry Connolly, the legacy. He's in really big shoes to fill, and he's just been an amazing presence in Virginia for a long time. So thank you, Congressman Connolly and his whole family. And so, we're going to start off. We're going to be going in order and the reverse order for each question. But we're going to start off with opening statements. And so, just 2 minutes to talk about yourself and why you're here and why you're running.
Thank you, Congressman. My name is Candace Bennett, and I am running for Congress because I was asked to by a friend who works for the federal government, whose husband was fired in April by DOJ. And their story is not unique, and that should alarm all of us. I'm running because I'm angry, I'm worried, and I am fed up with a government that treats federal workers like political targets and shows open contempt for the rule of law. But I'm also running because I believe in something bigger, that we can fight back, that we can protect our democracy, and we can rebuild trust in public service. I've spent over 20 years here in Northern Virginia working to improve people's lives, from expanding affordable housing at Good Shepherd Housing and to serving on the Fairfax County Planning Commission. I fight for accessibility, economic resilience, and a community where everyone has a roof over their head and a path to opportunity. This race is not about career politicians. It is about real people. Our neighbors, our veterans, our seniors. I'm not backed by political machines. I am backed by working families, by public servants, and by voters like you. And I am ready to get to work for all of us.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dan Lee. I'm the son of South Korean immigrants. They came to Fairfax County, like other refugees and immigrants, to find a better life. My father was a small business owner, and my mother was a nurse. I'm a proud product of Fairfax County Public Schools. This is where I was born and raised. I attended George Washington University for college, sweeping floors. I received my master's in public health and my MBA from Dartmouth. After school, I went right to work in public service. I served in the White House, I advised the governor, and I tackled global poverty at the World Bank. Today, I'm a healthcare entrepreneur and advocate. But the title I'm most proud of is that I'm a caregiver for my mother, who has Parkinson's disease. She was a nurse, but she did not have health insurance until she turned 65 and qualified for Medicare. That day, June 18, 2013, is a day I will never forget. Today, she ages with dignity at home because of Medicare and Medicaid. Now, Trump is about to take that away from her, and that is unacceptable. We cannot keep doing the same things, elect the same people, and keep accepting the same excuses in a hope for a better future. We must fight the Trump administration, but we as Democrats must give Americans what it is we're fighting for. And here's what I believe. I believe in a country that provides guaranteed health care for all Americans. I believe in a country that provides a real, livable minimum wage. And I believe in a country that provides affordable dependent care for our kids and seniors. Because these aren't just nice things to have, these are essential to our right to exist. We cannot keep electing career politicians. We need someone who has a plan and someone who solves tough problems. Our country and our party have failed the working class, people like my mom and my dad. We have to lead with conviction and courage if we have any chance to save our democracy. My name is Dan Lee, and I'm going to deliver exactly that as your next member of Congress.
Buenas noches. My name is Leo Martinez, and I'm here tonight because this is basically a job interview. We're all trying to fill the void left by our great Congressman, Gerry Connolly. And throughout the night, we're going to see we have agreement on many issues, but we have different life stories. Mine is unique, and I present it to you as the reason why you should consider voting for me. When people speak about the Trump administration and the MAGA Republicans destroying and attacking our democracy, I lived it. I come from Venezuela after being one of the co-leaders of the opposition against Hugo Chavez. So when it comes to understanding how to confront authoritarianism, what works and what doesn't, I have not only the life experience, but also I've shown the courage that it takes to do it. On the other hand, we're all here talking about Republicans weaponizing government. I suffered, I lived it. Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio spread lies about me to block my nomination to become President Biden's leader at the Inter-American Development Bank. And when we all talk about creating opportunity, economic opportunity, I've also lived it. I'm one of the candidates in this forum that has a private and public sector experience with business experience here in the United States and abroad. I've worked also in the Commonwealth to help small business owners and to create affordability at the board of the University of Mary Washington. And I also did that job at the federal level. So I understand how to create an economy of opportunity. So what I think we have to see tonight is who is that fighter? Who is that person that has the courage and the determination to represent you in this difficult time? Thank you very much.
Hello everyone, I'm Amy Papineau. I'm running for Congress because we are living in unprecedented times right now, as evidenced by the recent strikes against Iran. And it should not be business as usual in Washington. I'm a 28-year career federal worker and a former CIA operations officer, and I will protect our national security, our federal workforce, and our economy in Northern Virginia. As an ops officer, it means I have done some of the hardest work for our government against rogue nations in the hardest locations around the globe, including the Middle East and Africa. My work has led to the capture of terrorists and narco-traffickers, and I served as a CIA station chief, the highest rank overseas. Back in DC, I led national security programs and served as a congressional fellow, working on healthcare and foreign policy issues for the Assistant Speaker of the House. I also worked congressional affairs for CIA, which was with our oversight committees where I advanced vital national security policy, and that legislation is currently protecting Americans every day. I am also deeply involved in our community. I'm a Fairfax County Small Business Commissioner. I volunteer for a local nonprofit, and I'm an active member of our PTA. I'm a mom of 2 children in Fairfax County Public Schools, a spouse of a combat veteran, and a volunteer for a local nonprofit. And a patriot. Everything I've done up to this point in my career and my life has prepared me to serve you in Congress. I will fight for our country and our community. We are not living in normal times, and so our choice for our next representative in Congress should not be business as usual. We need someone who has fought the bad guys and won. We need someone like me, who will take on Trump and the Doge, exerting oversight, controlling the chaos,
Thank
and
you.
taking back our government.
Thank you.
Stand up because I could not get the memo we should wear pants tonight. Thank you for all of you for being here. Thank you to the organizers. Always amazing to be with my former colleague, now Congressman Subramanian. My name is Stella Pekarsky, and I grew up in a working class Greek immigrant family right here in my older years in Virginia, started out in Greece. I began my professional career as an ESL student and then an ESL teacher rather, and then I operated a small business for 2 decades. I never in my life would have imagined nor thought I would be a politician. But when my community asked me to step up, I ran for the Fairfax County School Board. I flipped that seat from red to blue and was elected as chair during the COVID-19 crisis. As chair, I led our board's opposition against extremist Glenn Youngkin's book bans, his attacks on LGBTQ students, and the teacher snitch lines. Then, my community asked me to do something that is not exactly popular, especially not amongst people who are within our party structure. They said, please run against an incumbent senator who had been there a long time. It wasn't easy, it was frowned upon by many, but my community wanted a new vision and new leadership, and I won. In Richmond, I've taken on big fights that people have told me I'm crazy to take on. I took on large corporations for their price gouging tactics. I passed sweeping consumer protection reform. I took on big health insurance companies, and I passed transparency and for prior authorization. With my colleagues, we passed constitutional amendments to protect the woman's right to vote, to allow people to marry whomever they choose, and to have automatic restoration of voting rights when people have actually done their time. I have so much more. Happy to talk to you tonight. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Priya Panus, and I am a child and adolescent psychiatrist. I first knew that I wanted to be a doctor when I was 7 years old, and I was watching Nova on PBS with my family in my living room at Herndon. My parents really valued education, but they also instilled the values of service and compassion. Whether it was playing piano at recitals every year at the local nursing home in Reston, or tutoring kids when I was a high school student myself at Westfield, or volunteering at local orphanages when I was doing my med school in India, and most recently leaving practice to do a congressional fellowship with Senator Markey so that I could serve my patient population better. Serving the community has always been a huge part of my life. My training has taken me across the country, and wherever I went, people had the same concerns. They wanted to be able to provide for their families. They wanted their kids to have a good education and to be able to have a good future. And they wanted access to healthcare and not to be bankrupt by that healthcare. Tonight, we're here to talk about the direction that this country is heading. This is a moment of extreme divisiveness, and I believe that real leadership means taking people who have vastly different perspectives and finding common solutions. As a psychiatrist, I've made a career out of doing that, working with people who are conflicting and who are in crisis. And I believe that that same skill set of listening deeply, solving problems very practically, and keeping people at the heart of every decision that we make is really what Congress needs right now and what our country needs to heal.
Hi everyone, I'm Amy Roma and I'm running for Congress because our democracy is in crisis. We need a leader who knows how to fight back, protect our people, get things done, and most importantly, give us hope in our country again. I live in Vienna, Virginia with my husband and 2 children. I also help take care of my sister Suzanne, who has Down syndrome. And like many of you and the millions of people across America, I am watching in dismay as our healthcare system is being ripped apart by the Trump administration. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. We're seeing our government agencies decimated, with many in our community losing their job. We're seeing the rule of law ignored, and we're seeing the president take over power from Congress because Congress has just ceded its authority. But in addition to being a soccer mom, I'm also a lawyer with 20 years of deep legal and national security expertise. I hold an MBA from UVA. I've worked across all 3 branches of government. I've drafted legislation. I've testified before Congress. I've worked with dozens of government agencies and know them inside and out, and I have litigated in the courts. I know how power works, and importantly, I know how to stop it when it's being abused. I have spent my life practicing law to use and protect for people. When crisis hits, I don't stand down. I step in when government fails. I have evacuated Afghan allies out of Afghanistan when our US government failed them. I delivered billions of pieces of PPE at the beginning of the pandemic when our president could not find it. I went to the border to defend our immigrant families. I don't just talk, I act. Complaining about Trump is not going to change the situation we're in. We need more than just a safe Democratic vote. We need a Democrat with a strategy and a plan, and here's mine. On day 1, I'll be a legal watchdog, using every tool at my disposal to challenge Trump's overreach and protect the federal workforce. At the midterm, I'll lead reforms to restore checks and balance, ethics in government, and to rebuild our decimated government agencies. In the long term, I'll focus on promoting our economic well-being and repairing our global standing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Delegate Irene Shin. 안녕하세요, 여러분. 저는 버지니아주 하원의원 Irene Shin입니다. When I first got to Richmond 4 years ago, I went in under a Republican majority. So as you might imagine, I got told no a lot. They told me that's not how we do things here, over and over again, actually. But my very first piece of legislation in Richmond was a bill to prohibit utility companies from disconnecting families in the middle of public health crises like a pandemic or in extreme weather like the heat wave that we're all experiencing now. And they said, regulating utilities, that's not really how we do things here. And I thought, but why not? We could. And so I did. And that law came into effect just last year. This year, I passed a piece of legislation that allows women who are pregnant to access healthcare insurance, because that hadn't been the case before if you were getting healthcare off the exchange. And then again, I was told that's not how we do things here. And I thought, but we could, and I did. And I look around right now at Trump and his billionaire buddies who are dismantling our federal agencies, who have decimated the federal workforce here in Northern Virginia, who have their ICE agents terrorizing our neighborhoods. And I think to myself, surely this is not how we do things here in America, right? And so the reality of why I'm running is because I look up and I don't feel like Democratic leaders are rising to meet this moment. When tanks are rolling in our streets in American cities, I don't want to see 75 Democrats signing a resolution to thank ICE for their service. When ICE is ripping families apart in our neighborhoods, I don't want to look up and see 45 Democrats signing on to the Laken Riley Act, stripping our immigrant neighbors of their due process. As Democrats, we have to be able to wonder, what are we going to rebuild from the ashes of what Trump has burned down? And right now, I don't think there is a vision for that, and I'm offering a different vision for that. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm going to start just by thanking the organizers and all the volunteers who made this possible. I also want to take a minute to thank all of the incredible volunteers who are running the Firehouse primary right now. Give them a round of applause. We had a huge turnout at the Government Center today. I'm James Walkinshaw. I'm a Fairfax County Supervisor. I was a longtime Chief of Staff to Congressman Jerry Connolly, and I'm running for Congress because it's time to put the brakes on Trump's reckless agenda. I'm a lifelong Northern Virginian. I was born and raised here in a working class family. My dad was a plumber and my mom was a nurse. They taught me to work as hard as you possibly can every day to do the right thing and never back down from a bully. When I was 26 years old, I got the opportunity of a lifetime when Jerry Connolly asked me to be his Chief of Staff. We fought together to pass the Affordable Care Act, to deliver for federal employees, to take on the Trump administration when they attacked our immigrant neighbors, when they tried to repeal the Affordable Care Act. In 2019, I flipped a Republican-held seat on the Board of Supervisors and I went to work. I led the effort to ban guns from our libraries and our rec centers and our government buildings like this one. I passed historic reforms for workers and I led our efforts to address climate change. I'm running for Congress because we're in a 5-alarm fire moment for our democracy, and we need leaders who are ready to go to battle on day one. I have the experience to represent us and represent us well. I've taken on the Trump administration and beaten them before, and I will beat them again. I ask for your vote on Saturday, June 28th. Thank you all so much for coming out today.
We have a lot of really impressive candidates, and they have a lot of really impressive backgrounds and experiences and accomplishments. So my next question is, what are some of your top priorities if you get elected to Congress, and how are you going to use those backgrounds and experiences to tackle those priorities and represent the 11th District and even fight the Trump administration? We'll start with James.
Sure. So I think we got to recognize any one of us on this stage that's elected on September 9th in the special election will join the Democratic minority in the House of Representatives. But I believe there's a lot more that Democrats in the House of Representatives can be doing. And I've laid out a 3-part plan to tell people exactly how I would approach it. And it goes like this. First, investigate. Democrats have to be more aggressive in investigating the Trump administration, their corruption, their law breaking, their incompetence. Investigating all of that will set us up to be more successful in the midterms. Second, litigate. Democratic members of Congress have to be gathering the stories from their constituents, especially here in Northern Virginia, who know the law breaking, the corruption that's taking place within federal agencies. And we have to be putting those stories into courtrooms around the country so we can help the courts put the brakes on the Trump administration. Third, and probably most important, is mobilize. Every Democratic member of Congress in this moment has to be working with the activists in their communities who are resisting the Trump administration. We have to be organizing, we have to be putting our bodies on the line alongside them and helping to bolster that resistance to the Trump administration, because authoritarians around the world fear one thing the most, and it ain't any of us politicians here on the stage. They fear the people. They fear hundreds of thousands of people in the streets, and we all have to do that. As your representative in Congress, I will be by your side every step of the way in that fight.
So, number one.
I think next is Irene. We're going in order. Yeah.
We all know how to take turns, it's okay. Well, the question that I wanted to answer, because it was a 3-pronged question, but the first part of it was, which issues am I most interested and excited about tackling? And I'd say I have 3 top issues. Healthcare, which is core to my story and why I got started in politics to begin with. Immigration, because I believe that there needs to be an immigration system that works for folks, including building a pathway to citizenship for our undocumented neighbors. But also, as it comes to ICE, in 2021, there was a provision of the National Defense Authorization Act that required federal, military, and civilian law enforcement agencies to have to wear identification and markers for which government agency they work for. I can't understand for the life of me why that does not apply to ICE. And so those are two of the things that I'm really interested in tackling in. But the third thing is also around the resilience and fortitude of our government and our democracy. The John Lewis Voting Rights Act is one legislation I'm really interested and excited to support, but I also believe in making sure that the fortitude of our federal government, when we believe that our federal employees and the workforce are the backbone of our democracy, that we have to be making sure we're codifying protections so that no future president can illegally cut hundreds of thousands of jobs because he woke up and felt like it in vibes, right? That doesn't make any sense. And so, and making sure that our public employee labor unions are also strengthened because the executive order that Trump put out also diminishes their authority. And so, and if we look around, they've really been the first line of defense for federal employees. And so those are some of the things that I'm really interested in getting there to tackle immediately on day one.
Thank you. So a priority for me on day one would be protecting the federal workforce. And to expand upon the comments that James made, yes, we absolutely need to litigate, but it's not just telling the stories of the people in our district, it's also understanding the laws that are being violated and being able to explain that to the courts. And sometimes that's in an amicus brief, and other times it's a substantive argument. And so being able to weave those arguments is key. Investigate, absolutely. We have to do that as well. Unfortunately, most of our inspector generals lost their jobs. So we're going to have to use the tools that we have left. We also need to negotiate. There's an opportunity here to work with the Republicans to explain to them what is happening and to try to make the situation less worse. I say less worse because that is the approach that I've had to take from a legal perspective with a number of the executive orders that have come out. I have looked at the Republicans, I have seen what they were trying to do, I have explained the negative impact that it was going to have, and I was able to make them less worse. Unfortunately, that's all I could do in the situation. We also need to have transparency and lawmaking as well as in effect. The other two things that I just want to flag is that I would want to repeal the reconciliation bill that I'm pretty sure is going to be passed before anybody on this stage is in Congress. That's critical to making sure that healthcare, affordable housing, access to food assistance for the poor are able to get access to those things that they need. And the third is I would really like to focus on economic well-being and restoring our global positioning in the world. We see what's going on right now with Iran and Israel. We need to prevent further desecration of the U.S. global leadership.
So I think there's a couple different approaches that I would take when, taking office. Obviously, the big issue for me is healthcare and making sure that Medicaid and Medicare are protected. So many of my patients are on Medicaid, and as I've traveled across the country, I've seen so many hospitals that are in the red. And the cuts to Medicaid and Medicare that we will potentially see are going to be devastating. I don't think people necessarily understand how many of these hospitals are going to go bankrupt. And when that happens and those hospitals shut down, those patients are going to flood other hospital systems. And they are also not going to be reimbursed by Medicaid and Medicare. And those hospital systems have the potential to shut down. And we have this cascading effect that is potentially devastating to our country. So making sure that Medicaid and Medicare are preserved is a huge priority. That, in addition to mental health, obviously we are in the midst of a mental health crisis, making sure that our kiddos are being safe from social media, that they have resources in their school, such as emotional literacy programs, but also having therapists and providers. These are all things that are incredibly important to me and also dependent on Medicaid. Another area of that I'd like to work on is education. Again, my patients are so impacted by the resources that are provided in their schools. and I have to work with them on a daily basis, so expanding some of the programs that they have in education. But here in Fairfax County, we also talk about access to education. We have TJ, right? And how many of the parents here are trying to get their kids into the best school? But the question that my family always asked when we were growing up was, why is there only one TJ? Why are there not more? If we have so many thousands of kids who are asking for a higher education, why are we not able to provide it to them? And that goes the same for our kiddos who are...
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, so first of all, we're all here because we need to protect our democracy, full stop. That is the priority of every single person on this stage. What James said is absolutely true. That is what is happening right now in Congress, all of those things, but we need more of them. We need representatives who are louder about it, and representatives who are going to be able to communicate what they are doing for the American people. And I think that is where we are falling short in Congress. We are not communicating how we're standing up to the Trump administration. People want to see more of it. They want us to be louder. They want us out in the streets alongside our activists and people who are worried about what tomorrow is going to bring. Now, policy, which is what I really wish we could spend our time talking about. What is happening to the Department of Ed? Number one priority for me is to figure out, why are we dismantling our Department of Education? For me, as growing up in an immigrant family, my parents had no money. My only hope at success was our public schools. We are going to shortchange a generation of children. Full stop. Education. Healthcare. We need to get to Medicare for all, folks. Everybody should not only have access to health insurance, but it should be affordable, because what I hear from my constituents is they have access now, but they can't afford it until they're so sick that they're going to wait till the very end to go. So there is a lot we're going to do, but focusing on fighting back to preserve our democracy where it's being shred from every which way is priority number one. Thank you.
So 3 priorities. 1, federal government workforce. 2, national security. And 3, building up our middle class and protecting our small businesses. So as a 28-year career Fed, I worked for the FBI, for State Department, and for CIA. I know how to talk to members in Congress about how these cuts across our agencies are going to impact our national security. I was a field operator, and I know how these things will impact our national security in the long run. I've been talking to a lot of feds that have been riffed, that have been put on administrative leave, and I have their stories, and I want to represent them in Congress. And that is going to hurt us in the long run, because federal is local, our economy, we have to look out for. Even if we're not in the federal government, we know that that's going to impact our economy for years to come. National security. So I served in Kabul after the fall of the Taliban, and I served in Iraq after the fall of Saddam Hussein. And no one wants another war in the Middle East, a prolonged war. They do not want their taxpayer dollars to be going in that direction. And we need to exert our oversight in Congress. It is abysmal right now that Congress is not exerting oversight. So that would be my number 2 priority. My number 3 priority, the Democratic Party has lost a lot of the middle class. We need to put the working class family first. My dad was a union electrician. We need to protect unions, we need to protect the middle class by increasing minimum wage, also protecting Social Security and Medicare. So these are all my priorities on day 1 when I get into Congress. Thank you.
So here's a general priority we all agree. We have to defend our democracy. We are confronting authoritarianism. Let me tell you, I have been confronting authoritarianism myself. And everything that has said here is important. We have to draw a line of contention. And we have to be very strong in holding that line when it comes to those fundamental rights that are at stake. But here's the other thing that you need to do in order to defeat an authoritarian leader like Donald Trump. You have to understand why he got to power. And why he got to power is because there is a sense of economic insecurity and social anxiety that is driving people to think and to delegate on him, of all people in the world, imagine that, the power to do that. So we have to prioritize those issues that are necessary to respond to that economic insecurity. First, small businesses. That's an area where I have a wealth of experience that I want to bring in access to capital, access to contract, access to markets. Immigration, but not just out of compassion. I'm an immigrant myself, but I can make the case, the economic case for immigration. If we pass comprehensive immigration reform, this economy will grow 1.5% of GDP higher than it's growing today. If we do that as well, that path to citizenship will generate fiscal revenue. And if we do that, that will equalize and push up wages across the country. So all of that are the things that we're failing to tell the American people. And I intend not only to be an anti-Trump legislator, because you cannot succeed in the polarization. He wants the conflict. He wants that polarization. You have to be pro-something, and I intend to be pro-something.
I was volunteering on the Harris campaign in Georgia last November, and we were canvassing about 4,000 doors a day with the group I was with. And time again, every door we knocked on, they said we cannot vote for the Democrats because we simply do not want to buy what they're selling. After the election, it made me realize we need to go back to our roots, to focus on issues that affect working class families. This is why my campaign, from the very beginning, has focused on three things: providing universal health coverage through Medicare for All, a real livable minimum wage at $25 an hour, and to ensure that we provide affordable dependent care for our kids and seniors. Now, if any of you in this audience has been a caregiver or known someone who has, you know how hard it is. It is very hard. That should not happen in a nation like ours. Fairfax County requires you to make $32 an hour minimum for one person to live here. Currently, our minimum wage is only $12. We need to raise it. Healthcare. My father, when he was alive, he would ration his medications. He would skip certain days in his pill box. And I would ask him why he was doing that. He said because he didn't have any pills for the week and he had to ration it. For a country as wealthy as ours, where we spend twice as much per individual in the world on healthcare, and $5 trillion, that is not just unacceptable, that is immoral and shameful. So we must pass Medicare for all. These issues I just mentioned are not nice things to have. These are not just moral issues. These are economic issues that affect all of us. So we must focus on these issues. Thank you.
Top priorities. Number one, for here, Fairfax County, we need to fight for federal workers and federal contractors. They are the heart of our economy and they are the heart of our region. And we need to kick DOGE to the curb. We also need to protect Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. It is a lifeline for too many, for our seniors, for people with disabilities, for working families. And the cuts that are coming in this budget bill are catastrophic. And of course, protecting democracy, I think, as we all said, we are all here to protect democracy, but how are we going to do it? What's our strategy? We saw it last week. We need to make noise. And so the first thing we do, we try to take it to the floor. If we can't take it to the floor,
It's a community center.
Okay, and we need to take it to the, if we can't take it to the floor, we need to take it to the streets. And if the media won't listen to us, if the CNN will not listen to us, we need to talk to Al Jazeera, we need to talk to BBC, we need to talk to the asymmetric opportunities. We need to make them hear us. They didn't like it when we did it last week, so let's just keep making them uncomfortable.
Great answers. So let's switch to foreign policy. One of the biggest whoppers this president has told is that his presidency would mean the end of all wars and that there'd be world peace all over the globe. And so as we've seen, it's been the opposite of that. There's been ongoing conflict in Russia and Ukraine. There was an outbreak of war in India and Pakistan. And of course, the war in Gaza continues. And not just that, now we've got an Israel-Iran war. And then most recently, the US directly struck Iran. And so how would you approach foreign policy and military engagement in these regions of elected? What would guide your decision making? And specifically, do you think President Trump had the authority to carry out the military strikes in Iran? And do you support direct strikes in Iran? Start with you.
Again, that's a lot for 2 minutes, right? Okay. We need to reclaim our moral leadership on the world stage across the board. Ukraine, Iran, the Middle East, and India and Pakistan, China, just full stop. No, what the president did this weekend was illegal. He needed to take that action to Congress for approval, and he didn't. And so the Congress needs to retake its role in oversight and holding the administration accountable for its war powers.
I've traveled all over the world, and I've traveled extensively across the Middle East, and frankly, I've also seen things I wish I could unsee. The way I approach foreign policy, at least in the US right now, going backwards, is that President Trump absolutely broke the law. It is unconstitutional, and I fully support the war powers resolution that is going through Congress right now. Congress must act and have a say anytime this country may potentially go into war. We cannot allow that to happen. But also from my experience in a multilateral organization like the World Bank, where we work with our partners all across the world to achieve our common mutual goals. Multilateralism does work. We must work with our allies, we must work with our friends to ensure peace and stability. When there are issues that arise, we must create dialogue and engage with these individuals, because not doing so only puts us at risk, not just from a military, strategic point of view, but from an economic point of view. We have to ensure our safety and security, but that goes along with having open dialogue and ensuring we work with our allies and partners.
The first thing is clear. President Trump violated the Constitution when he did what he did this week, attacking Iran. The other thing that is clear is that they are hiding the intelligence, because Senator Murphy said very clearly that he had the same intelligence 2 weeks ago, and there was no imminent threat to the United States. So if I was in Congress, I will be like watching, a watchdog on that intelligence. Let's see what you have, because what we know is that you're attacking a foreign nation without congressional approval and without an imminent threat to the United States. On other issues, the United States has to go back to principled leadership. We have to enforce international law, humanitarian law, respect for human rights, and there are some conflicts in which the United States needs to avoid taking a side and needs to be in the center facilitating agreements and resolutions to long-time conflicts. But thirdly, I would say that our foreign policy should put a priority in Latin America. Why so? We're all concerned about migration. Unless we address the root causes of migration, which are development and opportunity across the Americas, which will mean further growth for the American economy and further opportunity for American businesses as well, we're not going to resolve the issue. So we need to refocus some of our priorities in the world. Latin America has to be one of them, because it serves also the purpose of addressing the root causes of migration.
have seen war up close, and I know the dangers of prolonged conflicts. We should always exhaust all diplomatic efforts and negotiations before engaging militarily. And while Trump was not required to get approval from Congress, he absolutely should have sought congressional support because of the magnitude of those strikes. The fact that he was striking 3 Iranian nuclear facilities, and which could ignite the region, and now from initial reports we're seeing that they may not have been all that successful, which is now going to most likely prolong this conflict. So this is why I want to serve in Congress, to exert oversight over this administration, because he absolutely should have sought congressional support for this strike. We don't want to be dragged into endless wars that cost lives and taxpayer monies. When Americans are struggling at home to put food on the table and to afford the cost of living, they don't want their money, taxpayer dollars, going to long conflicts and wars. And let's not forget that the reason why we're in this predicament to begin with is because Trump pulled out of the JCPOA in his first administration. So this could have been avoided. So, diplomacy, let's avoid the long conflicts, and let's put congressional oversight over this administration. Thank you.
Okay, yes, Trump should have gone to Congress, and not just his MAGA friends, but Congress. But he doesn't have respect, as we all know, which is a problem. When I think about foreign policy, I think about, a few tenets: peace. Always, 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 we have to exhaust our diplomatic means. Why? Because the lives of our service members matter. We have to do anything and everything we can before we put those people in harm's way. We have to stand up for democracy across the globe. We have to reclaim our stature as a world leader right now. We have to support our allies, and we have to ensure that we do whatever we can not to enter endless wars, because as has been said, this country has so many people suffering right now. People working 2-3 jobs and having to go to the food pantry on the weekend. People rationing their medicines because they can't afford them. We have to take care of our people, but we have to be able to maintain our stature in the world as a leader and support those who are fighting for democracy, and that is it. Thank you.
So I think all of us agree the answer is no, that the attack shouldn't have happened. I think where I see a real concern is that this is really Trump's pattern, right? He can't keep breaking things, whether it's here at home in terms of our institutions, or breaking them abroad and then calling it leadership. That's not what leadership is. Diplomacy really is the first line of action in all cases. And as a psychiatrist, I look at that as de-escalation, right? Those of you in healthcare, we know when you have a really psychotic patient who is potentially a danger to themselves and to others, we don't just go in as a lone ranger and try to handle that patient by ourselves. We bring in the nurses, we bring in other doctors, we bring in CPSs, we bring in techs, we bring in as many people, sometimes security, as possible to make sure that not only does one individual get injured, but the person themselves don't get injured. And then you try to talk them down. And if that doesn't work, then you might administer medication, but you have a lot of people there with you to help do that. And then if that works, right, then everybody is safe. And more importantly, the person themselves is safe, which in this analogy works to people within the country of Iran and our citizens who are there who haven't been able to leave. So I really feel like we need to focus on things from a humanitarian perspective, and also making sure that we have international cooperation. I've managed too many patients who have been the victims of terror attacks, who have been veterans, and who've had kids of veterans. And the fact is that peace really takes work, and that's the work that we need to be doing in Congress.
Right, so I'd like to thank the congressman for lumping together Israel, Ukraine, and Iran all into a 2-minute question. So I'm a nuclear energy specialist. I know uranium enrichment and nuclear nonproliferation. Iran is developing a nuclear weapon. It has 60% enriched uranium, which is weapons-grade uranium, and it's on its way to make a nuclear bomb. However, should we have bombed them? No. Should we have tried to use the diplomatic route? Absolutely. Do we have a diplomatic route? Absolutely. It was the JCPOA, also known as the Iran nuclear deal. I was actually in the Middle East speaking on the Iran nuclear deal when Trump was elected to office for the first time and saw firsthand the fear in people's eyes when they announced his presidency while I was on stage with a diplomat from Iran, because we knew that deal was going to get ripped up. We knew Iran was going to continue to develop nuclear weapons, and diplomacy wasn't going to work because the US reneged on its leadership and reneged on its promise. So Trump had a choice here, and he chose military action instead of diplomacy. We need to promptly switch back to diplomacy, use the International Atomic Energy Agency, which is the diplomatic watchdog, to prevent the proliferation of nuclear weapons. We need to make sure Iran does not get a nuclear weapon, but we also have to make sure that we don't escalate an already tense situation in the Middle East right now. And what we don't need to do is start swearing at other countries and telling everybody what we're going to do on Truth Social before we do it. The other thing we need to do is we need to continue to defend Ukraine, and that is because Ukraine had more nuclear weapons than any other country other than 2 after the fall of the USSR. They agreed to give them up in exchange. The US, the UK, and Russia agreed to protect their sovereign territory, and the US and UK agreed to protect them if they were ever invaded by Russia. If we want to prevent a de-escalation of global stability, if we want to prevent more wars and the proliferation of nuclear weapons, the US has to lead, and people have to be able to trust us.
So like my colleagues, I also agree. What the president did on Friday, this weekend, was illegal. The authority of dealing with war matters is absolutely within the authority of the Congress. It's not with the president and not with the king. If in Congress, I would absolutely support the War Powers Resolution. It was probably 21 or 22 years ago. My very first political activity that I remember being engaged in was attending an anti-Iraq war protest as a high school kid. And after I graduated from high school, I had friends who enlisted and gave years and limbs and sometimes lives to what was an endless conflict. So this potential conflict with Iran, being dragged into another conflict that could be perpetual, endless, on faulty information, without a long-term strategy. That all sounds really familiar, doesn't it? And so I'm unequivocally a no on going to war. And I really look forward to rebuilding a Democratic Party that is, again, the party of anti-war Democrats. I also want to, again, 2 minutes for a really complicated question. I want to talk also really briefly, because I think this might be the only opening to talk about the humanitarian crisis that's happening in Gaza right now. 56,000 lives lost, the majority of whom are women and children. The city has been obliterated, hospitals and schools have been bombed, and I wonder what role and what obligation does America have to play in preventing the more loss of life? And I believe that as of right now, America has sort of abscinded their authority and their moral obligation to that. And I think right now it is imperative for American leaders to be willing to step up and ask and call for a ceasefire immediately.
So I'll start, and I agree very much with Amy. Iran is pursuing a nuclear weapon. A nuclear-armed Iran is a threat to global stability, it's a threat to the United States. They have been very clear, the regime, that they hope to use a nuclear weapon to attack the United States of America. That said, the president's actions, President Trump's actions, are absolutely unconstitutional. The Constitution and the War Powers Act are very clear that absent an imminent threat or attack on the United States of America, the president must go to the Congress to seek authorization for that kind of military action. He should have done that, and he should have done that only after fully pursuing the diplomatic route that was available to him. But that's not where we are. I want to just talk about something a little bit different that I've been heard in terms of the United States and our global leadership. And one of the many moral failures of this administration has been the dismantling of USAID. My grandfather was a Foreign Service officer and worked at USAID. And if you have ever seen a child suffering from malaria or a child suffering from malnutrition anywhere in the world, the idea that we as Americans would not be willing to spend pennies to save millions of lives is outrageous. And for people like J.D. Vance to call themselves Christians, I don't know what kind of Christianity that is, but we're not willing to spend pennies literally to save the lives of children. So I think as the United States, when you talk about global leadership, we start by leading with our values. And value number one, if we can save a child's life for $1, you better believe that we're going to do it.
So many people have heard about what's going on in the federal workforce. Federal contractors, federal civil servants, veterans, people who have deep experience in the federal government have been doged, been fired. And this really impacts our communities. I represent the 10th and the 11th, even more so. This is going to affect our economy. And so I'd love to know, one, what are you going to do to stand up to this administration when it comes to protecting our federal workers? And what are you going to do generally to protect our economy, and especially Northern Virginia's economy, which is so deeply entwined with the federal government?
So there are 80,000 federal workers just in Fairfax County, and I'm sure many in this room. I was at an event recently in the Braddock district that I represent, 20 of us in the room. 4 were federal employees who had lost their job due to the Trump administration and DOGE. It is happening, and it is happening in our community. We are uniquely under attack. I'm very proud to have the endorsement of the National Federation of Federal Employees and NARFPAC, which is the National Association of Active and Retired Federal Employees, because I spent 11 years as Jerry Connolly's Chief of Staff fighting and delivering for federal workers, including during the Trump administration when we protected them from the disgusting actions that they attempted even then. It's worse now. And here's what we need to do as Democrats in the House. One, we have to use every parliamentary tool available to us in committee and on the floor to slow them down and to push back. And I know how to use those tools. But maybe more importantly and more broadly, and this is something all of us can do, we have to tell the stories of federal workers. We have to tell the stories of the incredible work that they do. I represent a group of people now who were the nuclear scientists at NNSA. And they were responsible for safeguarding our nuclear weapons. We're talking about nuclear weapons, safeguarding our nuclear weapons stockpile. They were fired in January of the Trump administration. Maybe by mistake, maybe on purpose. The experts safeguarding our nuclear weapons stockpile, fired by the Trump administration. That is how reckless this administration is. Now, those folks have been rehired after they learned the mistake that they made. But there are story after story after story of incredible public servants who give their time and talents, and in most cases could make a heck of a lot more money in the private sector, but choose to serve our nation because they believe in the mission. So we have to go across the country and spread that story and those stories. Thank you.
So I've talked to too many of my former colleagues.
Irene is next again. I love the enthusiasm.
Well, this is going to be a short answer because I feel like I covered it. My answer to the question about how we can respond to the crisis for the federal workforce, where, again, this administration has dismantled the federal government agency by agency, is to, one, propose protections that would prevent any other future administration from being able to illegally fire tens of thousands of employees. And two, it would be to reverse the executive order that the Trump administration has put out that removes collective bargaining rights from employees of federal agencies. That's an executive order that happened this year, and I think that it's, again, just to reiterate, it seems really obvious to me that the two things that are standing in the way of this administration right now and its federal employees are unions and courts. And we have to be able to send reinforcements for the unions to make sure they can do their jobs effectively to protect their employees, and also take back the majority in the Congress so that we can start to put in better judges everywhere. That seems really important. And I have 1 minute left, and I just wanted to say the one thing that I didn't get to say in my last question. I'm going to use my time here. Because I did talk about a ceasefire, but I also believe in ending the blockade right now and making sure that humanitarian aid, fuel, water, food, medical supplies can be let in immediately. And that feels like worth it for my 1 minute to talk about that. Thank you.
Echo Irene's support for humanitarian aid into Gaza. That was a great use of your 30 seconds left. And then I'm also going to just mention that there's a lot we can do right now. There's a lot we can do to protect the federal workforce that I don't see Democrats doing right now in government. One of those things is not only just telling their stories, but just to take another step past that, telling their stories and explaining to people the harm that will happen if you lose them. When the Trump administration fired all the people from NNSA that oversee our nuclear weapons program, I immediately called up the government and said, do you know what you just did? And I'm sure I'm one of many people, but I'm a nuclear non-proliferation expert and nuclear energy expert, and I could substantively explain to the government what it just did, and all those people got their jobs back. It's because people like me and other people understood what those agencies did, told the stories of the workers, and explained how we were going to be harmed by their loss of jobs. That's how we make EOs less bad than they would have been. That's how we prevent more losses of jobs than there otherwise would have been. We can't do everything right now, and honestly, the best strategy is to jam everything up in court so you can get hopefully past the midterm and then put that legislation into law that would put further protections for the federal workforce. But in Congress right now, what we need to be doing is shedding light and transparency and telling the stories and using that as a negotiating tool with the Republican majority to try to restrict the damage that is currently happening right now. And these are the tools that we should be using.
So my dad is a retired federal worker, and so I grew up hearing how service and his work for the federal government was service to America, service to the government, and service to this community. I found it incredibly disrespectful, like so many of us did, when Trump talked about how federal workers could go and work in the private sector for more money. They don't do it for the money. They do it because they're serving their country. I think it's kind of funny because we talked about telling stories, and then we added telling people how those stories are going to impact them. And I'm going to add one more layer, which is talking to Republicans about how their communities are going to be affected. So when I was doing my congressional fellowship, we definitely tried to slow a lot of the actions that the administration was taking, and we found that to be a really effective tool. But the other effective tool was helping some of the Republican politicians really understand the extent of how a lot of these executive orders are impacting their communities. We saw that they don't understand necessarily because we saw that when people called in to their politicians, they called into their representatives, they called into their senators, all of a sudden sometimes those representatives and senators would sort of say, oh, I'm not going to do that anymore, we're going to back off. And so we know that telling those stories and educating our Republican counterparts is a way of really making sure that we're moving forward. I think the other big piece of this is making sure that people understand not only how this is going to impact them, but also recognize the humanity in federal workers. We've heard a lot of comments about how, they sort of talk about them as this nameless, faceless group of people, and we really need to humanize them in
Thank
order
you.
for people to make a difference.
Thank you.
Thank you. So within a few days of Trump taking office, my office in the Senate started getting calls from my district, my constituents. I have one of the largest numbers of federal workers and contractors of Northern Virginia in my district. Stella, we're worried. We are too federal household family. We don't know what we're going to do. We don't know how we're going to send our kids to college. First thing I did was start to advocate in the state Senate for us to up the reimbursement for unemployment. Still not where it needs to be, but it was something. Here's the reality though, folks. There is, and I don't sugarcoat things, there is not a lot we can do right now in Congress. That's why the courts are so important. And that's why we have to support these people who are fighting in the courts to slow this down, and we need to put all our focus on communicating the stories of the devastation that this is happening on the families, on our local economy, and not just our local economy. It's gonna impact the entire Commonwealth, because this district, Northern Virginia, we are the economic engine of the Commonwealth. So these impacts will be far-reaching, and my friends, my colleagues down in Southwest Virginia are going to start feeling them pretty soon. So utilize the courts, focus on flipping the House next year, because that is our only hope. Thank you.
Okay, I'm finally getting the hang of this microphone thing. Okay, so I have talked to too many of my former colleagues and my neighbors and my friends of how they're being impacted. And when you work for the federal government like I did for 28 years, I was always under the Hatch Act, which means you're not involved in partisan politics. And also, they are worried about political retribution, and they cannot speak out like they want to speak out. So I feel like I am their representative out there right now fighting for them, and that's why I'm running for Congress. So I've been talking to a lot of my former colleagues, and one conversation stands out in particular. So, and I think I can make this I can be the interpreter to members of Congress on how these cuts are going to impact our future. So that is with our national security, our economic security, and this story helps demonstrate that. So I was talking to a former colleague. He was a rising star. He had won awards, but he'd only been on board for less than 2 years. He got riffed. He was working the fentanyl program, and he estimated that it cost $250,000 to onboard him and to train him. So the government waste that is happening because we're losing our best and brightest by riffing them, and then the impact on major issues like fentanyl and how that's going to impact our security at the border and our national security. So I can be that interpreter to our members of Congress, and also how that's going to impact. You mentioned small business. I feel like we need to stick up for the small businesses with these tariffs, and so I would support exclusion of there's a bill going on through Congress right now where it's stalled, but it's to protect our small businesses from tariffs, and so I would support that.
Thank you.
So every meeting I have around the district today is either with a federal worker that has lost his job, a federal worker, including some people that work with me at the Department of Commerce that were returned to their jobs based on a federal court order, and they're now on a basement without an assignment, or with a family that is fearing that they're going to be the next ones losing their job. On the other hand, I've been talking to small business owners, and they're all telling me, restaurants and small businesses, we are seeing consumption going down because people are very prudent about what they're doing with their money, exactly because of the reasons we know this is going to impact them. So we have to be very mindful of one thing. We need to walk the line, we need to hold the line for our federal workers. We need to protect their rights. We need to make sure that we do everything that has been said. But we need to be mindful of one thing. This is one of the characteristics of neo-authoritarianism. This, if I tell you that Hugo Chavez said the same words that he was combating fraud, waste, and abuse, that was what he said in Spanish. To do what? To gut civil service and bring loyalists into the administration. So be mindful. This is not about resolving our deficit or reorganizing our government for more efficiency. This is about building a cult in our federal government. Two, what are we gonna do when we fight? 1 year, 2 years is too much for the savings of a family to deal with. So we need to focus while we're in Congress in making sure that the tools for business development, small business development are there. The tools for workforce development are there. So many of these families can pivot from where they are to providing for their own, because this is gonna be a long fight. Donald Trump is gonna be there for a little while, and he's gonna try to do this. We're gonna push it through the courts. We're gonna do everything we can, but we have to be mindful that this is hitting families right now.
I believe our federal workers are a critical part of our national infrastructure, and we have to protect and defend that, absolutely. The fact is, our federal workers protect our water, they protect our medicines, they protect our food supplies, and they protect also our nuclear arsenal. The fact that these people are being fired without any sort of recourse is a shame upon our country. As your next member of Congress, I would like to do two things. One is we need to ensure that our federal workforce cannot ever be reclassified again such that they can lose their jobs. That is unacceptable. Secondly, we have to ensure that we invest in our federal workforce. I'm a former federal worker. We need to make sure that their pay is on par with the private sector so that we're always attracting the best talent. We need to make sure they get the best benefits. But we also have to make sure that federal jobs, we have to make these destination jobs, not a sacrifice for our country. We need to protect and defend and invest in our federal workforce.
Federal workers are the backbone of our democracy, and they are not political pawns. I will fight to restore due process, reverse the scheduled policy career directive, and protect whistleblowers who are risking their careers to defend the rule of law. I am running because I have seen firsthand what political retaliation looks like. Friends of mine, public servants, were fired by DOJ for simply doing their jobs. That is not just wrong, it's dangerous, and it undermines trust in government and destabilizes our entire region. In Congress, I will be a fierce advocate for a strong, professional, and nonpartisan civil service that is protected, not punished, for upholding its oath. I'll fight to fully repeal scheduled policy career, strengthen the Merit Systems Protection Board, and ensure agencies cannot bypass accountability with sham classifications or political loyalty tests. And I also won't forget our federal contractors, who too often serve beside career staff but are treated like second-class workers. Too many small business federal contractors have already closed their doors since January, and that is wrong. I will proudly support the Fair Pay for Federal Contractors Act and push to expand access to paid leave, job protections, and fair treatment across the board. Because this is not just about jobs, this is about defending democracy from the inside out.
So let's talk immigration for a second. I couldn't help but notice the other day that even Joe Rogan now is criticizing his president when it comes to immigration. You know things are bad. But the reason he is because he and many others forwarded the president thought they'd be going after criminals. And so they're showing up to restaurants and businesses and even schools and rounding up people in masks. And then you add on top of it, there are also people who are being detained, even though they are here documented, because of things that they have said in the past, for instance. We had the example of Columbia University and many others. And so one day, hopefully sooner rather than later, we're going to be in a majority too. So yes, tell me about your thoughts on all of this. And also, what would you think a comprehensive immigration reform looks like to you?
Well, our immigration system is broken and it's hurting families, our economy, and our national values. We need a system that's rooted in fairness, dignity, and the rule of law, not one driven by fear, cruelty, or political theater. In Congress, I will fight for a clear and achievable pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants, permanent protections for DACA recipients, and a humane, efficient asylum process. Family detention must end, full stop. Children do not belong in cages ever. But reform does not stop at policy. It requires accountability. We must hold DHS and ICE accountable for the raids and detentions that violate due process and show outright contempt for the Constitution. No government agency should be allowed to operate with impunity, especially when lives and civil liberties are at stake. I'll also support expanding legal immigration pathways to meet labor needs, reunite families, and help our economy grow. Because immigration doesn't weaken our country, it strengthens it. It built this nation, and it continues to make us great. We can have secure borders and a system that reflects our values, because the choice is not between compassion and control, it's between dysfunction and dignity, and I will always choose dignity. And I will fight for an immigration system that lives up to the promise of America.
My parents were immigrants. My wife is also an immigrant. She's sitting right here in the second row. And if I may just take a moment, one of my greatest personal accomplishments is convincing my wife to marry me 4 years ago. But she's also an American success story. We need more immigrants because immigrants built this country. Immigrants make this country as successful as it is today. We need to ensure that there are viable pathways for people who are maybe undocumented or people who would like to come here to study, to work. We need to ensure that we can continue to import the greatest talent in the minds of the world. We export the American dream. We need to make sure that we keep open our doors, ensure that this country can take in those brightest minds, because frankly, we need them. 40% of the Fortune 500 companies, their CEOs are immigrants. That shows you just how crucial immigrants are to our story. The fact that we have undocumented immigrants is not really their fault. It's a failure of the system. It is far, far about time that we have immigration reform. As your next member of Congress, I would pursue comprehensive immigration reform such that our DACA recipients can have a place here, to ensure that people who would like to come here to study and work, that they have viable pathways, and not have to wait 2, 3, 4, 5 years. For me, this story is personal because my parents were immigrants. They came here, became naturalized citizens, and they benefited from the amazing resources of this country. I want to ensure that other individuals across the world can see America as a beacon of hope, but also as a country with open doors.
Well, I'm a first-generation immigrant, and I am probably the only one in the stage who also is connected to a community that is under attack by this administration. The Venezuelan American community has been one of the communities that has been under attack, and I have been working side by side with human rights organizations, ACLU, here and abroad, because we had Venezuelans sent without due process to El Salvador, who are all innocent people. So before saying a few things about what I think needs to be done, I want to use that camera there, which is our Latino press. A mi gente que nos está escuchando, si ustedes me llevan al Congreso, van a tener una persona que todos los días va a estar allí defendiendo los derechos de nuestra comunidad, los derechos de los migrantes, los derechos de sus familias. Así que tengan muy en cuenta que el único que está aquí y entiende exactamente por lo que ustedes están pasando es Leopoldo Martínez. Immigration is my story, my own life. I came to this country, had to push a reset button and do everything I did for my family and my wife after leaving Venezuela out of political persecution. Immigration reform needs to go back to the days 20 years ago. Senator Ted Kennedy and Senator John McCain, a Republican and a Democrat, came to terms with a proposal that if we had done it 20 years ago, we would not be where we are. So let's start there. Let's use that blueprint. Pathway to citizenship. If we ask every undocumented immigrant in the United States, 13 million of them, long time here paying taxes and working hard, would you pay a fine to become a citizen? They will. We will be generating revenue, not spending money on immigration enforcement to break up families and break up also our Constitution and the rule of law and due process. And if we do this, we're gonna also give an immediate citizenship to DACA recipients. So go to my website and see what I have. But there is a proposal that we're talking about.
Today's Supreme Court decision to allow the Trump administration to resume the deportation of migrants to third countries is just another blow to our civil liberties because it's denying them due process. So we are a country built on immigration. I think a lot of us have the same thoughts on immigration, and we support streamlined processing. And I support the Dreamers. I want to see a path for the Dreamers. And I've met with advocates for the Dreamers when I was serving on the Hill as a congressional fellow. And so right now, as we've mentioned, ICE agents are ripping families apart, and at a minimum right now, we have to make sure that the masks and the plain clothes go away and that we institute immediately some guidelines and processes. But anyways, I'm proud to be from Fairfax County because we are a sanctuary jurisdiction, and that is allows people to feel safer. And so I appreciate what Fairfax County does for our immigrants in this area. Thank you.
Okay, so a few weeks ago, my son from middle school called me in the middle of the day and he said, "Mom, I'm scared." And in 2025, when your kid's not supposed to be on their cell phone, because I passed that bill, and they say they're scared, the one thing you're thinking about is, what's happening? Is there a gunman? But no, he said, my friend just got a call from his mother and his sister who are locked up in their bathroom because ICE is knocking on their door and running through their neighborhood. He's scared, Mom. He's going to go home. Nobody's going to be there. I'm scared. Are they going to come get me because Dad was born in Russia? Are they going to come get my friend? That's what we're doing to our communities. That is disgusting. That is what happens when we lose our humanity. Yes, immigration reform. Yes, make sure that people who are here, who have built their lives in this country, who are our neighbors and our friends, get pathways to citizenship. Don't make them jump through hoops. Streamline the process. Protect our DACA recipients and pave the way for them to do what they're already doing, which is funneling money into our economy and being citizens who are part of this great nation. We all have our immigration stories. My husband left the former Soviet Union as Jewish and under political asylum here with 2 luggages in his hands. People come here for the American dream. People come here because we are the best nation in the world, and we have got to live up to the promise because we are not doing that right now. That's what I would like to do. That's what I would like to see. Thank you.
So first I want to say I'm so sorry that that happened to your son. And the sad thing is that that's actually really reflective of a lot of the stories I'm hearing from kids that I work with. So I don't think I mentioned, but I'm an inpatient psychiatrist. I work with kids who are sick enough to require hospitalization. And this is something that I have heard from multiple children. I've also heard the stories of my patients who are undocumented, of the trauma that they have seen in their home countries that has led them to come here seeking asylum. In a lot of those cases, also the trauma they experienced during the journey, sometimes from adults who are accompanying them, and sometimes by security agents. And so, this is something that I feel very strongly about, that we need to protect not only the adults and the kids, but we also need to protect the ideal that we have for America, right? Because this is not, as you said, this is not what America stands for. And when we dehumanize people and we treat them so poorly, that sets our ideals down as a country, and that's not what any of us want. We need to remember that America is strongest when we remember that immigrants are our teachers, they're our engineers, they're our doctors. These are people within our community who are serving our country and empowering all of us to do better. And everything is stronger when we recognize the importance of immigrants, our national security, our education system, our science, our workforce, our economy. All of these things are impacted by immigration, and it's absolutely critical that we make sure that our immigration policies reflect the importance of that community.
So I'm going to start by telling a story. Under the first Trump administration, he was separating parents and children, and he was putting children in cages. I took a team of 40 lawyers down to the southern border. I'm one of probably the few people, maybe nobody else in this room has been in a detention facility. Maybe you have. If you have, God bless you. It is a terrible place to be. And the entire time I was in the detention facility, working with these scared women and children, I kept thinking, is this America? How are we in the United States right now? And I was in Texas. It blew my mind. And the stories of the women and children were all very similar. Almost everybody I met with, a couple hundred people over the course of the week, were all from Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras. They were all victims of terrible gang violence and state-sanctioned violence. Many of the children had been brutalized. Many of the women had been raped. Some of the people standing in front of me had lost a 3-year-old child that was tortured and murdered in front of them a month before they grabbed the other kid and they ran for the border. That is what we were facing. I actually wrote a book about that experience to help shed light on what was happening at the border. When we look at where we are in America, we need to think, when we are following and talking about immigration, we need to be talking about the rule of law. I can't believe how many times I have to enforce the rule of law with our own government. That's what I'm doing when I'm talking to our immigrant community. It's how do you get your work permit? How do you prevent yourself from being forcibly exported out of the United States? How do you pursue your asylum claim? How can you prevent the United States exporting you in violation of the Convention Against Torture? The second aspect is, one, make the government follow its own law. The second is intelligent immigration reform. Our immigration system is broken. When I was at the border, a family was released from detention to pursue an asylum case in 2018. Their hearing date is 2028. That's how you create a shadow society where people cannot integrate and cannot become a normal American. We need to make that happen too.
Thank you.
My dad, who's been in this country for more than 40 years, is still a permanent resident green card holder. And he has not changed over or applied for citizenship because he said the paperwork and the timeline is too daunting to figure it out. My dad went home to Korea in September, just last year, to care for his aging mother, who's 95 years old. And when he booked his flight to come back to Virginia, I begged him to come before January 20th. But of course, he was like, stubborn Korean men. He booked his flight for January 23rd. And he lands at Dulles, and my brother is there to pick him up, and my dad doesn't come out. Not for the first hour after they land, not for the second hour after they land, not for the third hour after they land. And he can't get a hold of him. And finally, my dad comes out and tells my brother that he had been detained for secondary questioning. Him and 30 or 40 other folks who came off of his flight. And I wondered what was the point of that, if it was just for secondary questioning, ultimately to just be like, okay, you can go home. And it was a good reminder for me that for this administration, the cruelty and the humiliation of it is the point. So comprehensive immigration reform is something that I feel really strongly about. It's something that I've been pushing for as an advocate for almost the last 10 years. It's about building a pathway to citizenship for our undocumented neighbors, but it's also about figuring out a streamlined process for folks who are seeking asylum or a temporary protected status for workers. I have a niche piece of this immigration thing that I'm also really interested in. Did you know that adoptee children who are adopted from foreign countries aren't always guaranteed citizenship when they get adopted by American citizen parents? And so that kid might grow up their whole life thinking they were citizens, accidentally get into trouble with the law, and then they'll be deported. So adoption justice is also a piece of the immigration work that I want to pursue. Thank you.
Okay, first, because Dan did it, I just want to say for the record, marrying my wife was the best decision I made. Watching on the live stream, maybe. I'm very proud of the fact that Fairfax County is the safest jurisdiction of its size in the United States with the lowest violent crime rate. And one of the reasons for that is because we partner with our immigrant community here. And I ran for the Board of Supervisors in 2019 while Trump was doing a lot of the things that he's doing today to our immigrant community, threatening, creating fear. And I ran on a commitment to ensure that I would do everything in my power to protect our immigrant community. And I'm very proud of the fact that I helped to draft and pass Fairfax County's trust policy, which ensures that immigrants who come to Fairfax County seeking our services and our assistance do not have to fear that their information will be shared with ICE or immigration authorities. So a victim of domestic violence can come to us and know that we in Fairfax County and our government are a safe place for them. But I think this issue of immigration is more than just about specific policies. It's really a battle over what America is in the 18th century, hundreds of years ago. However, I believe very strongly that the idea of America is that an immigrant who arrived yesterday is just as much an American as I am. Now, we can't take that for granted because J.D. Vance doesn't believe that. Donald Trump doesn't believe that. Their MAGA allies in Congress don't believe that. They believe to be American means your grandfather lived here, or maybe you just look like me. But to be an American means you buy into our ideas and our ideals of life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, that we're all created equal. And we have to fight hard for that idea of America because it is not guaranteed that it will prevail.
For audience questions, and it's a fun one. So So once
I have to go first this time.
Whoever wins will get sworn into Congress, and you'll get the same question that I get asked all the time, which is, what's going on with the Democratic Party? And everyone's got their hot take. The party's too young. The party's too old. The party went too far to the left. The party went too far to the right. But the reason everyone's got a hot take is really important is because how in the world did we let Donald Trump get elected again, right? That's really what we want to know. So I want to hear your hot take. What is your hot take on how we're going to turn this thing around and how are you going to get us back in the majority so that we can move this country forward? Because we know our policies are more popular, but something's going on in our party right now. How do we fix it?
Well, I don't think there's any one thing. And look, I've been an active Democrat for decades, and this is not a new debate. I'm old enough to remember just after the 2004 election when George W. Bush was reelected, and people said the Democratic Party was dead. Republicans had massive majorities. We had lost the heartland of America, and we could never come back. And we turned it around. And I believe very strongly that we can do that again. I'll tell you one thing that is a guide for me. So as I said when we started, I come from a working class family. My dad was a plumber and my mom was a nurse. I come from the kind of family where you get home after a hard day's work and your back hurts, you might have dirt under your fingernails, you've had a very hard day, not tip-tapping on keyboards like I do now. And I think a lot about on those job sites, and I started working on construction sites with my dad when I was 14 years old, 4:30 in the morning till 6 o'clock at night as long as it took. And when I talk about our policies and our ideas as a party, I think to myself, if I was sitting on the job site, talking to the guy next to me, who probably didn't go to college, right, in most cases. We're eating our lunch out of our lunch pail, how would this idea or this policy sound to that guy or that woman? And I think as Democrats, it is really important that we think about that. How do we communicate to working class Americans? How do we propound the policies that will impact their lives and convince them of the truth that we care deeply about the quality of their life, their ability to pay their rent or pay their mortgage, send their kids to college, take a vacation, and have dignity in the workplace. So that's how I think about it. I think about it as in terms of the guy on the job site working alongside me and my dad, and how do we win that guy back to the Democratic Party?
I jotted down a few thoughts. This might be all over the place. I'm gonna try and throw it all together. I think first off, Democrats need to lean into our values. I don't think we should run from our values like we did last year. I don't think we won any voters by campaigning 2 weeks with Liz Cheney. I think we should have spent 2 weeks running up the vote in Pittsburgh or Pennsylvania. I think when voters look up, they want to be able to see a difference between Republicans and Democrats. They want to see Democrats who will maybe also say we're not going to trade individual stocks. They want to see Democrats who are also saying no to tech billionaire bros in Silicon Valley. I think we have to be able to draw a stark enough contrast to say that's the Republican Party and this is the Democratic Party. And I think those lines have been muddied the past decade. And finally, I think that this is a moment for generational change. And when I say generational change, I'm not talking about age. I'm talking about a mindset and a willingness to try something different, and not just because you were told that's how we do things here, but to try something different. And that ties in directly with the idea of a lived experience. Instead of thinking about how do we best communicate to voters, what if instead we sent messengers who actually understood those lived experiences, because that was their lived experience too. If I'm talking about immigration reform, if I'm talking about a broken healthcare system, if I'm talking about how expensive it is to buy a home in Northern Virginia, I feel like I'm a good messenger of that because I've lived those experiences. And so when we can find Democratic leaders who can connect with the base authentically, because those are their lived experiences, I think that's when we can start to win back voters to the Democratic Party.
We had a presidential candidate who all of a sudden was not our presidential candidate a few months before the election, and then they swapped out somebody else. I lost trust in the Democratic Party when that happened. There's a lot of people who knew what was going on with Joe Biden. There's a lot of people who didn't say anything and didn't do anything until the public had already asked them to hold accountability for it. And then that's when people started to talk. And that was after the very cringeworthy debate we saw with Donald Trump. That shouldn't have happened. Swapping out our presidential candidate at the last minute shouldn't have happened. People didn't trust us. That's why we lost a lot of votes, and it could have been a heck of a lot closer. So we need to make sure that we are real. We need to make sure that we present candidates that people want to vote for. We also need to make sure that we let people have a choice in who their candidates are. That is critical. And when we choose candidates for us, and then we are forced to take that candidate, you're not participating in democracy when that happens. The other thing we need to do is make sure that Democrats have a message and a style that resonates with people. I sat on a panel, the White House held a fusion panel, a fusion meeting on the commercialization of fusion. They asked me to speak on the DEI panel, where they put every single minority person and woman on the same panel, and it was the DEI panel. I'm an actual thought leader on fusion energy, and actually probably one of the preeminent experts in the world. And they had me talking about the importance of DEI rather than talking about the substance. That's losing the message. We're losing the message and the importance of DEI, and we're not implementing it correctly. That's what we have to reorient our storyline around. What is it that we're trying to do? How are we trying to make life better?
So ultimately, I have to fall back on my training. When people are upset and angry, it's most of the time because they feel like they're not being heard or not being understood. And I think that that is a great place for the party to start, making sure that they are reaching out and really understanding what the concerns of the people are. I think we do a great job of fighting for those things. But I think we don't necessarily always do a great job of communicating them. I was listening to a podcast yesterday or the day before, and they were saying that in a poll, most Democrats felt like the Democratic Party wasn't actually addressing or caring about the issues that mattered most to them. But when they listed them, those are the things that I see us fighting for. So clearly there's a disconnect there. The other piece of it is that I think we need to take a different approach, right? We talk about fighting the administration, we talk about fighting the party, and that's absolutely what we definitely need to be doing. In addition to that, I think we need to be taking the approach of statesmanship, which is speaking with the other side. A lot of Democrats also say, a lot of people in general say that they want to see more collaboration and cooperation and conversation between the parties. And I think that that's what we need to do. It's not easy talking to people who have such vastly different perspectives than you, who sometimes you feel are in the wrong. That's not an easy thing to do by any means. And yet I think it's what we need to do. And I think that taking that approach will definitely win more voters and Democrats back to our side.
All right, Congressman, I know the answer to this. Obviously, all communication specialists are Republicans. we do have a problem with communication. But I think it goes much deeper than that. I think it has to do with, what is the point of this job? This is public service. This should not be a career. This should not be something that you get into and stay for decades. And you know why? Because when that happens, you lose your connection to community. You may be smart, you may love your community, but you lose that connection. And when I told you, I took on an incumbent Democrat, people were mad at me. I had somebody at the polls today come and scream expletives at me because I dared to run. Because my community said, would you represent us? And I dared do that. That's our problem. It's the amount of money, the dark money that's being funneled into the coffers of our career politicians, which shuts everybody else out and does not allow people, everyday people with connections to their community who understand the struggles that their neighbors are facing because they're facing them too. That's our problem, and until we change that, and that's not just a Republican Party problem, at some point we're going to have to hold up that mirror and realize that is a Democrat problem. We have that problem. So I am so excited to see the amazing, and this is an amazing group of people, who all belong here, who all have a lot to offer our communities, and with whom I hope to partner no matter what happens to get great things done and to get our democratic message out.
Thank you.
All right, so I've got 3 hot takes. One, we lost the working class. People were worried about delivering for their families, for bringing home food on the table, and the Dems were worried too much about the fringe issues, or at least the message was not getting through to the working class. So I think that's one. 2, we need to improve civics education across the country. Because people need to understand what democratic values are and the balance of government. It is so important. We do a great job here around the Fairfax area and in Virginia, but rural America, not so much. So we really need to get involved in that. And then, 3rd, can we take back the American flag? I mean, hello, Dems, Stars and Stripes. The MAGA movement has hijacked our flag, and we need to take it back. We need to remember patriotism. When I was out protesting at the No King's Day rallies, it was great to see so many American flags and so much patriotism and standing up to the king. Somebody that wants to be a king. And so that energy was great, and we need to capture the flag back and really bring patriotism back to the Democratic Party. Thank you.
A few things in the hot takes. The last election, we won ballot initiatives in places where our candidates lost. Think about that. Our candidates were not able to connect to an issue that we won on a ballot initiative, sometimes with more than 60% of the vote. Yet, our candidate for Congress lost. Our candidate for the presidency lost. There is a big political malpractice issue there. If you cannot connect to the issues that are getting you to win as a candidate, but those issues are in the ballot and are at stake, there is a problem. So that's one thing that I think we should be revisiting all these next few cycles. Two, we did not lose the last presidential election to a man that got the majority of the popular vote. We lost the election because close to 6 or 7 million Democratic-leaning voters or Democrat voters stayed at home. Yet we were telling them how much of a threat Donald Trump is, and he is, to our democracy, but they did not feel the urgency. Why? Because representation matters. There are a lot of communities that feel that they are being taken for granted. Take the Latino community, for instance. How many times we had promised, cycle after cycle, that we will bring immigration reform to the bank. We haven't. So people are not believing, once again, that. Finally, we cannot win elections if you're only campaigning on the blue areas of a state. You have to go to the places where you're not winning, because you have to close the margins in those places. If you lose in places in Virginia 80-10, or 80-20, or 90-10, you need to compensate with perfect performance on the other places of the state. So we got to go back to the voters.
My hot take is that Democrats have been losing because we overpromise and underdeliver. We need to ensure that if we make promises, we deliver them. Not in 5, 10, or 15 years, but today. The reason is, when I worked in state government, part of my job was to ensure that literally the trains would run on time. My job was to ensure that people got their unemployment checks on time, and to ensure that when they were at their DMV waiting to renew their driver's licenses, that they weren't waiting 2-3 hours. We reduced it down to 30 minutes. The thing is, Democrats, when you imagine what happened, say, 15 years ago with the Affordable Care Act. When the Affordable Care Act was passed, it took 4 years, nearly 4 years, before the marketplaces came online. For someone who requires health care or health insurance, 1 day is too long. We need to be relentlessly focused on delivering for the American people, particularly for the working class. We need to deliver affordable housing. But when we have affordable housing that is 4 times per square foot in one state versus another, and if we have some mayors who say that affordable housing units are being sold at $600,000 to $700,000 per door, that is not affordable housing. That is a failure to deliver. We need to get back to our roots and focus relentlessly on what the outcomes we want to be and reverse engineer it to how we get there. Congress has a vital role to play in that. Legislation can either be enabling or disabling. We need to ensure that our Congress, our Democratic caucus, focuses on enabling legislation to ensure affordable housing gets done, that healthcare is finally affordable and accessible to all Americans, to ensure that we have a minimum wage that we can actually live on. If we deliver these things, Democrats won't have any problem winning.
My hot take is, we as candidates and the party, we need to start listening to our voters, and we need to stop listening to the consultants who are running on strategies from 20 and 30 years ago. I think what we're seeing happening in New York City today, this weekend, is what is reflective of the conflict we're having in this party, where the old guard and the establishment jumps in because they're afraid of change. One thing I remain deeply frustrated about the last administration is we had 4 years. We did not do enough to protect our systems and our elections from foreign interference. In Congress, I will champion strong election security measures and defend our our systems from cyber attacks and foreign interference, because we've already seen hostile actors try to manipulate our elections, and they're going to keep doing it. This is just not about left and right, this is about right and wrong, and I will hold both parties accountable because I am not here to protect power. I am here to protect our people.
Thank you for the audience questions. Okay. We're going to do the closing statements now, and I know people want to meet you face to face, so if we can now do 1-minute closing statements, if that's okay.
This race comes down to one simple question: who will fight for you? I have built my life around service, shaped by a family of educators and engineers, by witnessing 9/11 near the Pentagon on my commute, and by a deep love for our community. I spent the last decade delivering results, not just promises, advocating for housing, helping families stay afloat, and making policy that puts people first. I will fight to get our neighbors back to work. I will defend due process, and I will protect a nonpartisan civil service. I will stand up for Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, because those are not entitlements, they are earned. I am not beholden to special interests. I answer only to the people of Fairfax. If you send me to Congress, I will bring courage, competence, and compassion to this job, and I will never forget who I'm there to serve.
Thank you, everyone. For me, as a caregiver, I do the groceries for my mom every week because due to her disability, she can't do it herself. This is her SNAP card from Virginia. She relies on this to eat every single week. Over 40 million Americans rely on these benefits to put food on the table, and Trump is about to rip that away from us. That is unacceptable, and that will not happen. For me, this fight is personal. I have skin in the game. If any of you were protecting someone you love and someone came after them, would you not fight with every fiber of your being for them? That is what it means to be a fighter. For me, I'm going to do this because I care about my family, and I care about families all across this country because we've lived through the struggles. We cannot stand idly by and just talk big words and do nothing. We have learned time and time again that if we do nothing, we keep losing elections. For me, as your next member of Congress, I will bring that fight to Washington.
Thank you.
You deserve a fighter. Thank you.
There has been a lot of agreements tonight among us, but the question is about leadership. Who will be the fighter you need in Congress? 20 years ago, I had to make a very tough decision with my wife and 4 children. Persecuted by an authoritarian regime, we decided to come to the United States for 3 reasons. First, it was a country of immigrants that welcomed immigrants. 2, it was a country of economic opportunity. 3, it was the beacon of democracy and rule of law. I will not let anyone take those 3 things away in the country I choose to be my land, my country, my home. So, I'm taking that passionate fight to Congress. And I will be ready to take another oath. I've taken many oaths throughout the past few years to serve our country. I'm ready to take this one and take that fight to Congress. And to the people watching me, los latinos que me están viendo, tenemos la oportunidad de llevar una voz latina al Congreso y depende de ustedes.
Thank you.
So on 9/11, I was downtown DC on a training exercise for the government, and the Pentagon was hit. And I left the city, and I will never forget the smoke billowing out of the Pentagon. And it was on that day that I said, I'll dedicate my life to national security. I went on to serve in Iraq and Afghanistan and around the globe, countering rogue nations. On January 6th, when our capital was being attacked and we had an insurrection, I felt the same pull to fight against the MAGA movement and our current administration now. And I feel like we need someone with a different kind of background these days in there. We need someone that has fought the bad guys And we know we need to have someone that knows how to get things done in Congress. And I have done that on some difficult national security policy, having to work across the aisle and compromise. The Americans are sick and constituents are sick of the gridlock in Congress. We need someone to take on the bad guys. Thank you.
Thank you first, everyone. Really appreciate being part of this. As I shared earlier, I am Greek American. My first language was Greek. I'm proud to be an American, though, who still has a strong connection to her ancestors' homeland, to Greece. Our current political climate reminds me of a story that I learned growing up. During the Second World War, when the fascists came to Greece and said, "You're either with us or we're going to take you down," the Greeks, being ever brave and courageous and very, very stubborn people, looked at the fascist threats, looked at Mussolini and said, "Ochi." Ochi in Greek means no. But it was more than just a word for the Greeks. They took to the streets chanting, "Ochi, ochi, ochi." We will defend democracy. We will not go down. Ever since that...
Thank you.
There's no way that was 2 minutes.
Just a reminder, it's 1 minute, not 2 minutes.
So as a physician and a psychiatrist, I have spent my career truly listening to people, helping them navigate crisis and chaos, and helping them find the hope through that crisis and chaos, and working with them to find a path together. And that's what I do best. I've seen firsthand how policy doesn't live on paper. It lives in my patients, in their families. It lives in hospitals and clinics, in schools and libraries, and on the streets. I know what happens when Medicaid will be gutted. I know what happens when trust is lost in NIH, CDC, FDA. I know what happens when the institutions that have been created to protect us are now being dismantled altogether or weaponized against us. And that's why I'm running. We're all going to be fighting, all of us. And as a psychiatrist, I have to fight really hard for my patients. But I think what's important is that I'm also trained to find common ground with people that I don't necessarily see eye to eye to. And I think that that's really important in Congress. I'm here because I believe in service, and that's why I want to go to Washington.
All right, so for all of you who are wondering why we're rushing through it, they changed our 2-minute closing to 1 minute. So we're all kind of scrambling through it. So I will just keep this brief. I'm running right now for Congress because we need 2 things to happen. We need somebody who can stop the damage that Trump is doing and then repair it. And we need somebody who can put optimism back into our country so that we have faith in democracy again, we have faith in America again, and we have faith in the economic opportunities and the leadership of America again. We need somebody who can do both of those things, and I can do both of those things. I have the legal tools and training and 20 years of experience to be able to figure out how to use those levers to fight back against Trump. I also have the economic experience, business experience, national security experience to help build up our economic opportunity, lead in U.S. innovation and leadership, create jobs, and strengthen our global standing. So thank you.
I'm going to spend this 1 minute giving my closing statement, but also talking about an issue that I think is worth noting, because a lot of folks have asked me, how do you differentiate yourself from this incredible and very talented field? And for a Fairfax electorate, I think it's really important to tell you that I've been opposed to the casino in Fairfax County. You know, it's not just Congress that's enjoying really, really low approval ratings. It's actually the entire Democratic Party, and it's not hard to see why. When you look up and you are seeing Democrats who aren't really being the opposition party, my mom always taught me, if you're going to be a bear, you might as well be a grizzly bear. And so if we're going to be the opposition party, the Democratic Party needs to actually step up and be the opposition party. And this is a moment for generational change. I didn't inherit an email list, and I didn't inherit a Twitter account. But I have fought for every single legislative game, both in a Republican majority and a Democratic majority. It is a lot more fun being in the Democratic majority, but I hope you'll join me on the 28th ready for me. Thank you.
I just want to thank everyone for coming out, and it's an honor for me to be up here with this incredible group of candidates. Look, I'm proud to have the endorsement of late Congressman Jerry Connolly, former Congresswoman Jennifer Wexton, Congressman Don Beyer, and more than 50 federal, state, and local officials. But this race is about our records and what we can do for the 11th District in Congress. In December of 2024, I got the letter from Stephen Miller saying that if I didn't agree to turn Fairfax County Police into Trump's mass deportation force, they would put me in prison. I didn't back down when I got that letter, and I won't back down from Trump and his right-wing MAGA allies in Congress. I have the experience to fight for our community and to do it strategically and effectively. Alongside Jerry Connolly and on the Board of Supervisors, I've taken on the Trump administration before in some of the biggest fights, and I've beaten them. And that's what I want to do for you in Congress. I ask for your vote on Saturday, June 28th. Thank you all so much for coming out this evening.
Let's give these candidates a big round of applause.